Christmas. Happy
holidays. Yeah.
Ah.
Hey, jingle bells, everybody.
What? I don't. Is that
Merry Christmas?
Have you ever greeted somebody with that phrase?
No.
Someone walks in your door, jingle bells.
But I can't see anybody on the podcast,
Right.
And so I just went with it.
Yeah.
This is my favorite time of the year.
Yeah, mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
How can it not be? But do you enjoy the weather? Do you mind the cold?
Cold never bothered me anyway.
Hey.
I'm good with the weather. I do not like it when there's ice on the ground. That I hate that.
That's
that's where I draw the line. Snow,
sure,
not so
beautiful.
bad. Yeah, beautiful for the first couple days, and then then I want it to come back, and I start. I'm like January 10th, and I'm like, all right, let's go summer.
Snow around here is kind of like Botox. It's like it starts snowing at first, like, wow, this is really great. But if it doesn't keep snowing, if you don't keep getting the Botox, it just it turns into like this mush on the ground, and it's like, it has to keep snowing to remain. I don't know what I'm.
Yeah, I had no idea that you knew that much about Botox. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, it's the end of the year. You were talking about this at our staff meeting this morning because it's a Monday that we're recording this. How you do an end of the year review.
Yes.
And so you were talking about highlighting stuff and the positive and negatives and journaling and reflecting and all those things are important. Let's do a mini version of that.
Got it.
Because we're going to keep this as the Christmas edition a little bit shorter. But what's one thing you feel like you learned in 20? It's 2021, right? Yeah, it's 2021. By the way, I've noticed that probably most conversations, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to tell a story, it's almost always divided, I don't tell them, in the year, I just say before the pandemic, everything's divided. It's like the new AD BC. Anyways.
Yes. I tell people, like, I'll frame it like this. I'll go, this happened, post 9/11, pre-pandemic.
Right, that time frame.
Yeah.
The golden age.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways. So one thing you learned in 2021.
Man, oh man. Just one thing. Okay, well, I would say I learned how to I wish I would have thought about this.
You didn't take some Rosetta Stone class or anything like that? Learn German?
Okay, random fact,
sure.
And then a real thing. Random fact, I learned that in the 1700s, the nation of England actually had the modern calendar, but they were off from what we are today, and they moved it to shift to where, in other words, in England, their calendar year, I think January started in our April or something like that. And they were,
so they were the only ones.
Well, I don't know. It was written in this, it's in this book I'm reading. There was actually a guy who was writing in America in 1750 and the footnote talked about this, and I'm like, what? Anyways, that was one thing I learned, but that has nothing to do with real life. What I learned in 2021 is, on the biggest scale, I learned that God is in control of things and he's got a game plan. But also I would say that I learned about some spiritual practices that I really read quite a bit about that helped me to really deepen my prayer life. And that was something I learned.
Give us one.
I learned, I have to give a little context, but I learned about silence and solitude, and how to do some silent prayer, which sounds funny because of just the way I grew up. It just doesn't sound natural.
What is the benefit of silent prayer?
The benefit is I'm encountering God's presence, and I'm also a side benefit is my anxiety level's gone way down, and the peace in my life has gone way up. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I learned about that.
Doing it,
I started doing that probably in August, and practicing it, adding it to my personal, quiet devotion
To
time.
bring some balance to the staff, I've been doing the exact opposite. So what I'll do is I'll get my
prayers.
iPhone and my iPad and my laptop and the TV, and they're all playing different stuff.
My in ears
And,
and then
I go,
beats.
Lord, I can, and I just try to focus my mind. And anyways, so never a quiet moment with
You know what
me.
that reminds me of? It reminds me of when we had like a family night and we're all downstairs, and and we're gonna watch a movie together, and everybody's on their phones while the movie's playing.
What movie was it?
It doesn't matter. I don't even know.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny though.
Yeah. So that's one thing I learned. What about you?
Okay.
What did you learn this year? What's one thing you learned? You're in college, doing college classes online.
Back to college.
Yeah, I love that. So what's something
Yeah.
you learned that stood out to you?
Yeah. Okay, I'll give a small thing and a bigger thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to school and I didn't. It was both and. Part of me was annoyed that I ever stopped in the first place.
Sure.
You know, part of me maybe was a little bit of pride going, I read and I study hard and,
Yeah, I don't know if I need it.
Right. And I was taking some of those kind of beginner classes at the Bible college I was going to, and I just was like, I'm reading N.T. Wright. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like anyways. But I ended up doing it, and I'm glad I did it. I think the thing I learned is this is probably not relevant to most people, but even knowing something in your mind or reading about it, writing has a way of making you articulate and think differently.
Wow, yeah.
And it's much more difficult. So been doing a lot like right now I'm writing a paper, and it's probably the hardest paper I think I've had to write, honestly, on Lot and Sodom. And I have to
wow.
yeah, very interesting.
And so
Anyways, the
the
practice of writing,
Yeah.
stuff I go,
our good friend Alejandro
yeah,
challenged me to try to start writing a little bit more every
Yeah.
day. Yeah, it's a great one. Okay, so
Yeah.
was that the big or the small thing you
that's a
learned?
small thing. That was just like,
This next one's
I've
gonna be
become a better
mind-blowing.
writer.
Yeah.
Through
Yeah, that's great.
the bigger thing, maybe the more spiritual thing, that I feel like I've learned into 2021. You know what?
He's still with us, folks.
Yeah,
Give
I'm
him
still
just
with
a
you.
minute.
It's actually probably something I learned from my counselor. Is the first thing that came to my mind.
Yep.
And there was one point where I was telling him how I was feeling, and then he said to me, he goes, "You feel like you invalidate your feelings a lot, and you'll justify for how you feel something, but then you'll tell me the justification for why maybe you shouldn't be feeling that way." He's like, you overanalyze so many things. And so we were talking about that, and he says, Austin, that's called emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is when, because I don't have this crazy story of going through just horrific things that of people I know that have gone through it, that I don't think I should be feeling anxious or a certain way because so many other people are going through it so much worse. And it's emotional reasoning. It's reasoning from emotion first. And that's something I learned this year that I do that has been very helpful to
Have you been able
recognize.
to make changes there, do you think?
Heck no. I'm just kidding. I think the first step has been realizing that's something I do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really good.
So we have this little here's a side thing. We have this little rule that I created at the beginning of it.
Okay.
It took about a month in a meeting with my counselor, so 4 weeks.
Yep.
And I told him, I said, I would like to start off each time by telling you something. If there's something I don't want to tell you, I want to tell you it. And he goes, okay. He goes, okay, and I said, because I was wanting to tell you that on the first week, and I didn't want to tell you. He goes, what did you want to tell me? I said, what I'm about to tell you. And it's not like horrific stuff, but like, you just feel kind of, you ever have a thought in your head and, if it was to be broadcasted to the whole world, whatever it might be, an insecurity or anything, you'd feel embarrassed.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm sitting across the guy I don't know, So how you feeling today,
So
Austin?
instead of sharing
I start
something
off,
you want to tell him the deepest.
well, I start off, so I just, like the first one I remember telling him, I just said, I feel insecure about this.
Yeah.
And he goes, why? Well, this is it, anyways, but so counseling's been great, but
yeah, I'm a big fan of counseling.
But that's a personal thing. It's more something I learned that I do, and I've learned that it's not helpful, and that that's what he always asks me. Hey, Austin, you're anxious about that? I go, yeah. He goes, is that helpful in this moment to be anxious? I go, no. I go, so okay, so let's talk through that, because there are times where being anxious is helpful. If you are slamming your brakes in front of a car that you see, you want anxiety for the adrenaline, or there's, but not for most things, like that. So anyways, that's what I learned. You're a big reader. I enjoy reading as well.
I would like to think I'm a medium-sized reader.
Yeah. But do you feel this way about reading? This is how I feel reading. There's part of me that likes it because it's almost like this sentimental. There's a sentimental part of it, It's kind of like there's just this picture in my head of sitting down with a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning and opening up a book and
wrapped in a soft wool blanket,
right?
With birds flying in the window.
It sounds peaceful and educated and stuff. Right?
Yeah, it's like this is what people do if they really get somewhere in life. They read.
Right. But the other part, and I don't know if you
okay, go for it.
Because most of what I read is what I enjoy. It also mixes with sometimes what I do at the church and with school. Not everything I read I enjoy, but that the topic or lane of what I'm reading. But I literally sometimes will be like, I don't want to read, and then I have this thought. This is really weird. I will think there's an atheist 27-year-old on the East Coast who I literally think this stuff, who is reading twice as much as me. And he's going to write a book one day and about blah, 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 blah.
And so you need to get ahead.
And I feel like I'm packing ammo in a gun. I am not joking. When I'm reading,
at you because I know this is you growing up in adulthood. Like there's a competition thing in you.
But that's literally the motivating factor.
That's amazing.
It's the fuel. I'm not.
Do you
joking.
know what I started thinking when you're telling me the story?
Yeah.
And when you go, do you think this? You have these, and you haven't said it, and you started to go. When I'm reading, I started thinking about the weird things I do when I read. And you know what I thought of? I read with a highlighter. I use the gel stick highlighters. So you twist the bottom and the thing, and eventually when they wear out,
cute.
when the pink highlighter, you've twisted it enough and it runs out and it falls out because you twist it and it comes out. There's no more, and I get kind of excited and I go, oh my gosh, I've read so much that I used up another highlighter.
It's like when a grandma's out of yarn from sewing or something.
You're thinking about how you can change the world with the gospel and counteract famous future atheist writers, and I'm like, got through another highlighter. I really do think that though. That's awesome.
I don't know. I just
and I need to go on record that that's not all I think about when I'm like use more highlighter. That's not. But
ladies and gentlemen, I've been over his house. He skims. It's not even reading. He skims. He's just highlighting stuff every page. I used 4 highlighters this book, Austin. I know what to get you for Christmas.
You can't open the pages because they're stuck together with a highlighter. Oh man.
Okay. We're gonna keep this episode a little bit shorter because it's just like it's our Christmas edition.
Doesn't feel like it. Okay.
So why do you have what's your top 2 to 4 top 3 book recommendations? Favorite books of the year So, because people maybe they don't like to read, but maybe they want to do Audible or buy the audio version or whatever.
Okay. Are we going to go back and forth on this? Like I'll share a book and then you share a book, or how do you want to do this?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, I would say one of the best books I read this year is called Jesus and the Disinherited. And it's written by a guy whose last name's Thurman, Thurman, and it's a short book, and he writes about the cause of justice and how Jesus lived in captivity, and the Jews were in some ways disinherited from their own land because of the Romans, and then how they were to act, and how Jesus interacted with people who had lost what was theirs. And he uses that. He's an African-American author, and this guy was actually the forerunner and a mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. And so his ideas are great, and they're marked in history, but they're in an era that is removed, from our modern day views and takes and positioning on race and race theory and all that. And it just goes back to, and he comes up with a biblical framework of how Jesus interacted, and it was really good to read. And so I love that book. So that'd be my first one that I just go, man, this was a great book.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't know if this was a little over a year ago, but just roughly. I mentioned this, I think, last podcast, but it's called Total Truth by Nancy Percy. It's a bigger book. It's theological, but I don't think it's like, it doesn't use such big words and stuff that.
Can I ask, is it more of because I bought it because of your recommendation.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
Is it more of a philosophy book or a theology book? Like, is it really actually theology, or do you think it's more of a theological take on philosophy and worldview?
I think it's
a blend?
I think it's a little bit of a blend.
Okay.
But in essence, the whole book is Christian worldview, and here's kind of the sections of the book. The problem with the Christian worldview today.
Okay.
And then here's what the world is offering as their worldview. And she goes into materialism and Darwinism. And she goes after Darwinism and Darwin's worldview.
Okay.
Then she goes into the birth of evangelicalism, what is called the First and Second Great Awakenings in America, and how that has shaped how evangelicals have a worldview. And then she goes into her solutions.
Yeah.
So anyways, I found it very interesting. And especially if you're a Christian and you have friends who are atheists, or they think Christianity is not reasonable, this book has some awesome weapons, resources.
Cool. I'm excited to read it.
To share your faith. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I would say for me, the next great book that I read, I'm trying to look for it's called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And it's by Peter Scazzaro. And this book actually felt like I was getting pastored when I read it. And he what he does is he draws a connection to, he says, in our modern Christian worldview, evangelicalism, for many of us, we tend to go, hey, the spiritual life is important, but our emotional life, we just need to overcome the emotions and move on into, doing what we're supposed to do. But he says our emotional life is a really true thermometer of where we're at, and God moves and works with us within our emotions. And most Christians don't dive deep into why and where those emotions come from. And so, like you shared about the counseling, and just dealing with why do you feel the way, sometimes some of the deepest spiritual answers for my life have been, my emotions either get the best of me, but they started because of something, I'm angry because something bad happened. So anyway, Pete Scazzaro's book, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, kind of has some really practical tools for a Christian on how to get below the surface. And he has some surveys in there that you can actually circle numbers. You kind of do a self-inventory on some things. And then he has some ways for you to begin to do practices, spiritual practices that help you to really know Jesus in your life and how he wants to work with you. And it was really a helpful book to me. And I was like, man, this is great. So I've actually recommended that to a few people. Really loved that book. And that's part of where, I don't know if it was on this podcast or not, but I kind of began doing some silent prayer and just getting alone with God.
Yeah, you were talking about that at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah. And so this guy actually helped kind of inform that and knowing what to do and how to pray silently. And it was really good. Yeah.
That's awesome. I only have two, so I'm gonna let you go next one after this. But this one is like a massive prime rib. You know, it's something you're gonna really want to chew on. Ooh. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's Orthodoxy by Gk Chesterton.
Yeah, that's it's not even that big of a book.
It's not that big. I think it's like 230 pages or something like that. But I think it's, in my opinion.
Is it Orthodoxy? Is that the one?
It's Orthodoxy.
Yes.
It's the most quotable book I've ever read.
Yeah, he has some thoughts in there.
He's a mind bender.
Yeah, he was a contemporary of like C.S. Lewis, right? On some level?
He's the one who influenced mostly C.S. Lewis to get into the faith. C.S. Lewis said that he only added water to his wine.
Yeah.
He viewed Chesterton in high esteem. But Chesterton, born Catholic, walked away from the faith. And he tells this cool story in one of his books. It's not Orthodoxy. But he talks, maybe it is Orthodoxy actually. But he talks about how he lives in this house. It's a parable about himself. And he sees across the way what looks to be like a mansion. And he gets out of his house, and to go there, he goes like through this valley, if you will. And as he gets closer, he starts getting more tired. And as he gets closer to the house, he realizes it's not that big. He thought it was this big mansion. And he looks behind him, and he looks at where he was living. And he realizes that where he was beautiful. It was the mansion. And he uses that story to talk about Orthodoxy, how he left the Christian faith thinking that the world had something better. Only when he got far enough away, he turned around to look at, he says, I looked at Orthodoxy, I looked at Christianity, and I realized I was missing out on the real mansion, and he returned home.
Wow, yeah, that's beautiful.
Great book, though.
He frames a way of looking at the world and looking at he actually doesn't like quote a lot of scripture.
No, he's more of like a philosophical writer.
No, I loved it, not because it didn't have scripture, but because
he's not a theologian. Yeah.
Right. He's actually caused me to think about even the idea of stories. He does a chapter on fairy tales and how they're more true because they talk about the unseen world that we actually instinctively as children believe. That's a great book.
And there's great, in that chapter he talks about how he says you don't actually have to tell kids, you don't have to tell kids fairy tales. He says because stories are good enough for them.
They believe there are monsters and there are heroes.
Right. But the older you get, anyways, it's a great book.
We don't want to spoil it for everybody.
Buddy dies. Okay, what's your third book?
I thought you were talking about Will Ferrell, Buddy, the elf.
No.
Buddy dies. No.
He will one day.
Okay. Yeah. Here is a book that I read that was really a timely book. And I actually had our whole staff go through it. We just finished it up, called Live No Lies. Live No Lies by John Mark Comer. He's a pastor in Portland. He actually just retired out of pastoring. He's just going to be a writer. But what he does is he talks about the three enemies of a Christian. And he opens the book saying, have you just felt like you're at war and there's just this lack of peace? He goes, it's because you are there. And he says there's three enemies in the Christian's life. There's the flesh, the devil, and the world. And he goes through a biblical synopsis in really modern day terms to help us really clearly and easily understand who the devil is and how he uses deception in our life, how the flesh, just our own desires get tweaked and work against us if we're not careful. And he distinguishes in there, this is something I learned. He said, we have our strongest desires and our deepest desires.
That was really good.
Yeah, he says the devil will emphasize our strongest desires. So like when you're hungry,
Right.
or you have any kind of a desire, sometimes those become to the surface and become the strongest, most motivating desire in your life at that moment.
Right.
But those aren't your deepest desires. Your deepest desires are to really know God. And he talks about how the flesh then, if it keeps feeding the stronger desires, and we never make our bodies submit to going after the things that are our deepest desires, then we lose that battle. And then he talks about the way of the world. And at the end of each of these three kind of sections of the book, he has things that the Bible gives us answers that are ways that we today can actually win the wars.
In our practical application.
Yeah, very practical. And the other thing I loved about that book, Austin, was how he talked about how societies redefine terms. And so when we go to engage with people and we want to talk about freedom or being authentic, your authentic self, that means something completely different to a non-Christian mindset today than it would to us. And he goes to classic literature and Christian literature and says, this is what freedom is. And
that is a great book.
So it
that
really
would have been my number 3, I think.
Yeah, it's really practical on how to engage with people and how to actually just strengthen your inner person. Very easy read.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Are you ready? Those are your top 3. We found that we learned what you learned. What's your favorite Christmas movie of all time?
Boom. Do you know what it is? Because I tried to make our family watch it every year. Nobody wanted to.
Miracle on 34th?
Yes, that's it. Miracle on 34th Street, the black and white edition, the original.
I told my wife she wants to watch all these she wanted to watch this old Halloween movie that was on Disney Channel back in the day called, I don't even remember the name, but it was like, it's like a kid's movie.
Yeah.
And I told her, I will not watch movies unless they're classic.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I will not watch it.
Okay.
And my definition of classic.
Yeah, because you never watched
Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And that's like over 15 years old.
That's interesting. So
I don't want to watch black and white movies.
So last spring and winter, you know what I did? What? I went back and watched because of COVID, when there was no like series weren't coming out and stuff. I went back and started watching classic westerns that I'd never seen. I probably watched 10 different westerns, and that was fantastic. Yeah. But Miracle on 34th Street.
That's your favorite Christmas movie?
I love that movie. All right. You guys, watch the whole thing through, please. And then modern Elf is just, there's nothing greater than Elf. But my favorite is that one.
It's Elf, or I also loved A Christmas Story growing up.
Is that the one with the leg?
Shoot your eye out.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think it was Elf.
I do love the one.
Elf was so funny when it came out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I've just seen it so many times now where it's like it loses that.
Yeah. What's the movie with the guy who has got the angel who the angel tries to keep him from jumping off, and It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah.
That's great, but it's so long.
Yeah.
And kind of, if you've watched it like once or twice, it's kind of like there, but yeah, it's a good one.
Okay. Well, I think mine would be Elf.
Yep. I'll tell you what else. Can I just give a plug for something?
Yeah.
December 29th, Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Coming out on Disney Plus, and I'm pretty excited about that because I'm a Star Wars fan.
And the new Kenobi series comes out in January.
No.
I heard January 1st.
For real?
Yes. And in the fall, we have the new Lord of the Rings series from Amazon Prime. Hallelujah.
That's amazing.
Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, and Merry Christmas to everybody watching and listening.
Yeah, thanks. And just want to say for those that are new vintage church podcast listeners, January, we're going to do some new podcasts and whatnot, but we also are going to be doing 21 days of seeking God together starting on January 3rd. And we're going to do 3 days of fasting at the end of that. But we have a book that a pastor that we know wrote, and it's for sale at our church. It's kind of a daily guide, like a journal to go through and get you ready. And man, I've done it once, and it's so powerful. I'm excited for the new year for our whole church family to just seek God together. It's going to be a good year.
It's going to be really good. Okay. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Feliz Navidad, everybody.
Yeah.
See you next episode.